Okay, so continuing on from my last video, it just got me thinking about rock stars and musicians and the way that we view them, really, the way that some of us project certain qualities onto these people. Even going back to the 1960s or 70s, people like Jim Morrison and that from the Doors, and he seemed like a really cool guy for a couple of years. He had the image, the leather pants and the swagger and the charisma and all this. But in reality, he ended up dead at 27 years old, through his lifestyle, really, through alcohol and drugs and fast living and that. And we kind of there's a whole mythology around these people, and we give them certain qualities. And I'm a fan of, I love music. If you look at the playlist on my channel, I've got over 1,000 songs on there, and I like all sorts of music. I like the Doors, I like all sorts. But the older I've got, the more I can kind of see that some people they kind of project these qualities onto these people that they probably don't have. They're probably the reality of these lives that they live. The reality of these people's lives is different, and sometimes than the fantasy. The fantasy of this rock star, and quite often the very troubled people. And I suppose that's why some of us who are troubled ourselves can kind of relate to these people. I know myself. I know I've always been interested in people that have had, the musicians who have had problems, and reading their autobiographies and hearing about the problems they've come through and battled against alcohol and drugs and a search for meaning. And I've always been more interested in lyrics that were deep, I suppose, or that kind of, rather than just happy go lucky kind of pop music, which I quite like as well. I quite like pop music, and I quite like 80s music and a bit of feel good music. But I've always been more attracted to people that have been a little bit troubled, really, musicians that have gone a bit crazy and a bit wild and a bit have been troubled. It's probably because I've struggled myself with different issues, and just growing up, really, and being a teenager. And so I can kind of see the appeal in a way. But I think sometimes I don't know whether it's something that teenagers do, or sometimes people will carry it on into their 20s and 30s, but they'll still have this view of these people as really cool people. And quite often, some of them have taken their own lives, either directly or indirectly through drugs, alcohol, or they've ended up in a bad way, really. And it just seems to me the whole kind of rock industry, and there's a lot of it seems to be scattered with like casualties of one sort or another. And you sometimes think that the best choice for these people would be just to quit the industry, to completely quit the industry and try and sort their own problems out, and rather than touring. But I know, of course, they love music, they love making music, and I suppose they love performing. But sometimes maybe the best thing to do would just be to get away from it all, kind of retire for a certain amount of time, or even permanently, really, if it's gonna save their lives. So for every person like Keith Richards who's a survivor and that, and or even Paul McCartney from the Beatles, he seems to be kind of unaffected by the fame, and he's probably like Paul McCartney's probably one of the world's most famous musicians that's alive, and he seems to be relatively together. So for every person like him or Keith Richards who seems to be kind of together, there's a lot of people that are on the edge, I suppose. It seems to be that way anyway. But we don't know any of these musicians, really, whether it's like David Bowie, who passed away, whether it's Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, whether it's Kurt Cobain, whether it's Jim Morrison, you name it, any of these, these kind of legendary people. We don't really know who they are. We get a snippet of their lives by watching music videos, and we watch interviews with them, and we might go to a concert which lasts a couple of hours and we get a little snippet of their lives, but we don't know what goes on, like anyone else really, behind closed doors. We don't know the personal things that they're dealing with. You know, you get a glimpse into the world of somebody, and you project these qualities onto these people that may or may not be true. You get a and you might read an interview in a magazine about your favourites, you know, band member or your favourite celebrity, whatever, and you get a snippet, you get a glimpse into their life, and like I said, it might not be an accurate portrayal of who they are. And of course, I've mentioned before, you know, you can never be in anyone's head. You can't, even your own family. You don't know what somebody's thinking. So the image of these people, these rock stars, the image is probably sometimes different than the reality. And that's just some of my thoughts. And thanks for watching.